Well, good evening, Adam. Thank you so much for agreeing to come on Rich Politics.
Good evening, Richard. It's so lovely to be here.
Well, it's not the first time we've talked. Of course, I've been on your show as well as a guest, and you've interviewed me, I think, twice on two different occasions, I think. Is that right? I can't remember.
Yeah, I believe so. I think one was sort of the first interview was from the spring of this year, when it was a sort of what the hell is going on with the country and with the world. And then the more recent interview, we talked about your campaign to disestablish the Welsh Assembly, the Senedd. I've been anti-devolution all my life, so any moves to get rid of devolution anywhere are moves that I support.
Well, we might come to that. Maybe not on this particular show today. Interesting to note that when I was on in spring, we were looking at the mess that the world was in politically. I don't think it's changed much, is it really, apart from the COVID situation that we find ourselves in?
I think it's probably got a bit worse, because when someone's an idiot once, you can always forgive, random acts of idiocy. But when it's done repeatedly, that idiocy quickly becomes a form of insanity. And worse yet, I think that they know what they're doing. I think that they want to do this. And I think that it's quite sick that our ancient liberties are being sacrificed on the altar of undemocratic technocracy. It's an insult to the history of all four nations. It's an insult, frankly, to the entire Commonwealth that was built on a system of law where everything was legal unless specifically prohibited. And we've jumped right into the fire of Napoleonic-style law, where everything is illegal unless the government or regime give you permission. It's awful.
Yeah, I think we'll stay with that. We'll before we get to that, we'll talk about civil liberties and a few other issues as well. I want to talk about technocracy, you mentioned as well, which is an in word at the moment. I just want to ask you a little bit about yourself, because I know you're in London, but you're a broadcaster as well. You do music, and obviously you're a historian as well, and a political current affairs broadcaster. So tell us a little bit how you got into that, Adam, and what it is you actually do.
Right. Well, I've got a weekly radio show. It's broadcast 3 times, but it's live and real and all the rest of it on Thursday evenings at 8 p.m. And you can find that at prepare for the technical jargon www.scotland69am.com. 69 is with numbers, not letters, to save your fingers from getting too exhausted. And that's a music show. It's rock music. Mostly prog rock, some heavy metal, hard rock, a bit of weird stuff, but some might say those other categories are weird too, so I throw my hands up. For those people who like the heavy rock in the morning, at 8 a.m. on a Friday, it repeats. And then for our listeners in America, Australia, and everywhere else, Canada, it's at 1 in the morning on a Monday, which I'd feel insulted about if it wasn't an international station. And I know people are listening in Canada. And I also do a podcast. Recently, I've been promoting a lot of classical music there, because that's one of my other loves. But I also obviously do interviews. That's where I interviewed you. I've interviewed some former MEPs, former members of parliament, political journalists, the 3 good ones that we've got. I'm sure there's a few more. And that sort of thing. I offer my views on the world, and I've got no short supply of that, but I'm a man after policies rather than a man pursuing vanity projects, as many politicians seem to be. I'm interested in the policies, which is what's sort of led me to the party that I'm a member of now.
Yeah, I was going to say, we'll come to that in a few moments. We'll talk about your recent change and move to the party you're with now. I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about you and how you got involved with politics. What was it that intrigued you, that got you involved? At what age did you start? It's one of those things I'm curious to know. I've been reading some of the ancient Greeks, and I think I tweeted one this morning. I can't think of the actual quote itself, but basically it says, you can't ignore politics because it involves, affecting everybody's lives. I think it's Pericles. It was the guy that I read, and it does. And no matter what we think, even if we are disengaged with politics, we're not interested in politics, it does affect everybody's life, whether they like it or engage with it or not. So how did you get involved with it, Adam?
Well, you took the words out of my mouth. I mean, I had a grandfather that I suppose, like many of that war generation, they listened to the news on the radio and the television. Funnily enough, my grandmother was more into radio, my grandfather more television. I'm more of a radio man myself, but in this internet age, it's all, it's all together. And there's nothing unusual about that, but I enjoyed it. I found it interesting. And I never liked being told what to do, whether in school, whether in general. Not that I was ever a bad person. I don't think I've ever committed a crime in my life. And the only crime I want to commit now is leaving the house without being told to cover my face like an Iranian woman in Tehran. But that's as maybe. But I suppose being a free spirit, I've always gravitated towards pro-liberty politics, and hearing about the horrors of the Second World War, a war that we ultimately had to fight, and the country and the allies of Britain did with so much valor. I don't like the idea of going to war for fun, going to war because the idea of killing some people that don't want to kill you will somehow make them better off. It's of course nonsense, and some people make a bit of money out of it. Some people get the connections they need to go work. Where was Tony Blair working? I think it was Goldman Sachs where he worked at after leaving Number 10. So I suppose individual freedom and an antipathy for foreign entanglements were dear to my heart at a young age because of the things that I heard, the things that I saw, and later on down the line, the things I read.
Were your parents influential in getting you to start thinking about politics?
No one ever told me to think about politics, ever. I don't know if I was ever discouraged from thinking about politics. I mean, but no one ever said, oh, politics is important. No one really told me that. And I suppose you can make of that what you will. It was sort of, it was a passion driven, I think, from my street that's rebellious, but also traditionalist, half devil and half child, and now the child is father to man. We're getting very poetic here, which is fine.
And so we're going to speak to you a little bit about the recent move, because I know that you were still are, of course, a Brexiteer, like myself. There was many of us, and we fought for that along many others in the country as well. But you've recently joined UKIP. Now, I was surprised at that, given you came across to me as a very conservative person in sense of your politics. So I was quite shocked. Not that UKIP is a bad thing for you, but I wasn't expecting it. And when I got the news, I thought, I need to speak to you. I want to find out, why is Adam Garrie gone with UKIP? Well, what is it that's got him to join this party? So tell us, Adam, in your own words, what is it that made you move to this new party?
Because they're the only party that stands on a manifesto of pure and unadulterated freedom. It is a party that puts freedom first in every sense: freedom of speech, freedom to run your business with minimal state interference, freedom to run your family and your own life in the way that you and your family agree to, rather than have orders faxed or emailed down to you from on high. They're a party that wants no entanglements with the rest of the world. Trade, don't invade, as I like to say. Freedom first for the individual. And a country that's run on a traditional basis of responsibility for one's own actions under the law, rather than this weird collective responsibility where special interest groups, NGOs, many of which are actually GOs, because one way or another they get government funding, are essentially dictating government policy. It's as though we've gone from government via think tank to government via mob rule. Whichever small and insignificant organization, whether it's a bogus charity or whether it's a group of agitators and activists, all they need to do is shout, and what matters is the amplification rather than their numbers in terms of the classical democratic sense. We don't want the law of the jungle, we want the law of parliamentary supremacy.
Do you think your decision's been made because of what has now become conservatism? I mean, conservative politics was, the freedom of speech, which I'm sure they still say it is, all the things you've just mentioned there. that wouldn't that be a conservative? And why is it you felt that you needed to move away from, the centre kind of politics, or centre right, whatever you might be, to UKIP? Because some would argue that UKIP have got a past, like many other parties as well. They're very narrow-minded. They'd say in some cases they've been accused of fascism, racism, as you know, when Tommy Robinson tried to be an advisor to, I think it was Gerard Barton. So there's been some controversy around it, Adam, around the whole UKIP thing. And I know Neil Hamilton, I've met Neil, who's now the leader. In fact, I had lunch with him and Christine before the lockdown back in February, and I had a tremendous time with them. Plenty of wine as well, may I say. But we're great storyteller, lovely people, great storyteller, and very hilarious as well. But I just wonder why the drastic change? Why go to UKIP? Have you always looked at UKIP as a party that is something that attracted you before, or was this something that made you want to join them? What was it?
I always go to parties because of policies. I'm fiercely loyal in a personal sense. I'm incredibly selfish in terms of party politics. I go where the policies are. Now, as for the Conservative Party, you'd have a better chance of finding a virgin in an Amsterdam brothel than a Conservative in the Conservative Party. Yes, a lot of their members, wonderful people, as Trump might say, and very conservative, but they're very naive to still be part of that club. Now, UKIP is going through a renaissance in the classical sense, a rebirth. Yes, there were dark times when I wouldn't have been part of UKIP a couple of years ago. It was veering off into this direction of let's fight sectarianism and division and sectionalism with the same but the opposite. And as someone who's pro-liberty, a classical liberal really, but with conservative institutional sensibilities, that was of course not for me. That UKIP is dead. And the UKIP of sort of 2009, 2010, but with an even more robust move towards civil libertarianism is back. It's a party reborn. It's got a classic name. It was the name that won the Brexit referendum when it was led by Nigel Farage, and it's getting back to its roots as a pro-liberty, pro-national sovereignty, pro-common sense party, right at a time where the Conservatives have made a left turn right off the cliff.
With this renaissance or this change with the party you've alluded to, do you think that it's going to be big enough to throw off the accusations of being far right and extremist? I mean, we hear it often, and some of the parties, like not just UKIP, but many other parties as well, some of the accusations and allegations and allegedly things that they have faced over the years, is this change going to be enough to throw, those ideas off and to gain support and, more importantly, voters?
Well, to people that have questions about that, I would say don't listen to the MSM, the mainstream media. In fact, you could do yourself and your mental health a big favor by switching it off. Just turn it off. Don't engage with them. Don't fight with them. Don't get your blood pressure high. Change it off. Read the manifesto. It's a manifesto that looks at people as human beings, not as numbers on Mr. or rather Professor Valance's and Whitty's little slideshow. It doesn't look at them as members of groups. It doesn't look at them as statistics. It looks at them as human beings, where their home is their castle, their business is theirs and theirs alone. Their right to say what they want and do what they want, so long as it is peaceful against human life and human property. It's as simple as that. You couldn't find a single piece of bigotry there, where by contrast, half of the Labour Party wants the most anti-Semitic party leader in modern British history to be back in the party. So if we want to talk about bigotry and racism in politics, it's there. But I think Labour ought to be looking themselves in the mirror. UKIP have wiped that slate totally clean.
Yeah, I think it was earlier this week, or last week, I should say. Last week, I know that Neil Hamilton in the Senedd came under huge pressure from Welsh Labour and I think some other cross-party members as well, because he'd been supporting residents in Penally, where the refugees are, illegal immigrants, whatever they decide to call them, in the army training camps down there, in the barracks. Now, I ran a story on this a few weeks ago, actually, on one of the episodes. But, he was branded a racist for simply standing up for the communities, because there were people within that community down in Tenby here in Wales that felt strongly about having these refugees, put into these training camps in their little town centre, if you like, or not town centre, but in their, their region. I just wonder, what you're saying there is, it always seems to be whenever anybody makes a stand from a party that has got a bit of a history, that even though it's trying to change, they never seem to let go. They never see the sense, do they? They just start shouting and, calling you racists. And, we've had it here with the party I'm currently with now, because, we want to abolish the assembly, make no, thing about it. But I get called all sorts by the Welsh nationalists, and they're xenophobic, they're nasty, and there's no room for debate with these people. You can't discuss policy. You try to start the conversation off, and it goes into like smear campaigns and, calling you all sorts. And Neil has faced that in the Senate. I just wonder, for UKIP, whether or not the changes that they're making. I know that Bill, I can't think of his surname, former MEP, is now with you guys as well, isn't he? Up in Birmingham. Yeah, Bill Etheridge, good guy. I like some of his stuff. He's a good bloke. But I'm just wondering, what is the future for UKIP? I mean, of course, we've got local elections coming up across the UK, different, council elections, and down here in Wales and Scotland and other places. But I wonder, nationally now, what is the picture for UKIP? What are they seeking to do right now?
Well, first, let me just address the issue with Mr. Hamilton, which, as you say, great deal of unfairness from the media. We've got to get one thing clear. Helping yourself as a nation isn't hurting anyone else. But when you help those from other nations, whilst homeless veterans are freezing in the cold, homelessness is going to skyrocket because of idiotic lockdown policies where people aren't allowed to work or run their businesses. People aren't going to be able to pay their mortgages and their rents. Britain can't be the holding tank, the welcome center for everyone in the world, any more than any other country can. Singapore, a country I admire very much, it's a country with very strict migration policies, because if they hadn't, that small island would be filled with just about everyone from all of the substantially poorer countries around it. It's a nation's responsibility to look after itself, not to wish anyone else ill, but it's not the responsibility of one nation to look after another, any more than it's the responsibility of you to be compelled to help a neighbor. If you want to, I think that's a very good thing, but it's not for the government to spend the resources they take from us to help people who are coming in illegally, doing illegal things, and in many cases they come with the intention to do harm of various degrees. And now, getting to UKIP and the local elections, UKIP want to end devolution. This is going to be very important in Wales in particular. And in London, we've now got someone called Dr. Peter Gammons, who's running for the mayor of London. It's an office I want to abolish, but much as UKIP MEPs sat in the European Parliament, which I think the world, not just Britain, but the entire world would be better without, the same principle applies. Until you can get rid of a political office or a political institution one doesn't want, need, or like, one's got to do the best one can to get their voice heard. He's a very interesting man, and I think it's brilliant how for the last 4 years, anyone who supports Brexit has been called a gammon. I quite like gammon; it tastes great. I'm not going down the Boris Johnson, Kerry Simons vegetarian kebab route. But in any case, I think it's brilliant that he's turned that into something positive. You've got to roll with these things. So I think it's going to be very interesting to hear from him, to hear from Neil Hamilton in Wales. And overall, though, I think until the next general election, listen to the policies. If you're poorer than you were last year, think about UKIP. If you're less free than you were last year, think about UKIP. If you want the party that originated Brexit, that's also UKIP. And I would even say this, if you are a Remainer but care about civil liberties, care about your right to express yourself, you should also think about UKIP, because even though now the people that are in power, no matter what they say, they're Europhiles, once you slip into this mode of government through diktat rather than by parliamentary law, once you get into the iron fist rather than the ballot box, the pendulum could swing. And I stand for the free speech of everyone. So if you accept that Brexit as an electoral issue is settled, and in that sense it certainly is, the details are certainly not settled, join UKIP too. At least think about UKIP.
Well, I think you've done a good job of giving your party political broadcast, Adam. That's brilliant. No, that's fine, absolutely fine. This is what this show's about. We've had Welsh Conservatives on. We get people from all kinds of different political parties because when we're not mainstream media, we don't control in that sense who comes on. And for our viewers watching, if you're to the left on your politics and you want to come on, just drop me a message. You're more than welcome to come on and share what you want to share.
I think that's brilliant.
Yeah, just moving things on a little bit, Adam, because we're almost out of time, because we try and keep YouTube stuff really short for our viewers, because most people don't stay on more than 20 minutes. You know what they're like. Apart from you that are watching right now, I appreciate it. Just two questions I'm going to put together before I wrap things up. I know it's gone really quick, but what are the most pressing issues right now politically, you would say, apart from COVID, of course?
Number one, free speech, because without a right to speak freely, all of the other rights cannot be defended. Free speech is a bit like having the genie bottle. You rub it and you say, I wish for a lifetime of wishes. Free speech can defend all of your other rights. And when that goes, the right to assemble goes, the right to economic liberty goes, the right to vote goes. Look at what's going on in America right now. Very, very dodgy indeed. Literally any other right you can think of goes when free speech goes. I think thing number two is going to be unemployment. I hate to say it, because even governments whose ideology I fundamentally disagree with, I don't want them to fail in unemployment, because that hurts ordinary people. It doesn't hurt the ministers in their Jaguars, never does. But we're going to see such horrible unemployment. We are going to need people who understand true economics and who understand what we need to do to get people back into work, back into normalcy, and back into a feeling of being human beings. Because for many, this lockdown has not just been an inconvenience, it's been dehumanizing. And when you combine the mental health problems with the unemployment problems, that's going to be the other big issue that we need to address.
Well, Adam, our time is almost up. I know you think that it's gone really quick, but it really does. Just one final question. If you could speak to Boris Johnson today, what would you say to him?
Apologize.
You would like to expand on that?
I'd like him to apologize for arrogance, incompetence, and a lack of willingness to be at all to have any circumspection about what his policies are doing. He talks about the science in the way that the Soviets talked about scientific communism, which to them was a real thing. It's of course nonsense, but when the gun is put to your head and you go to the gulag if you don't believe in it, it becomes quite real. This narrow-mindedness, this bigotry, is frankly terrible. And so if we can talk about the racial and religious bigotry of Labour, we've got the intellectual bigotry of the Conservative Party, who have a tunnel vision where the only light that they're shining is from that of the oncoming train.
Well, Adam, thank you ever so much. Well, ladies and gentlemen, you've heard it here first. Boris needs to apologise.
I don't think he
No. Adam, historian, political and current affairs broadcaster, journalist and musical broadcaster. Thank you for coming on Rich Politics today.
Thanks, Richard. It's been a pleasure.
Right, just stay.